All right, let's talk about the new inspector groups that you can toggle on and off. All right, so I'll let you know that creating them is actually very simple. It's just using them doesn't really change a whole lot. It's just, in my opinion, more of an organizational thing. All right, so if we go in, I'm just going to go into my control node here. I just have a rich text label, and I'll be setting the text with centered, font size of 100. We'll be able to pick the color and the message. All right, so if I go into my control, you'll see that we have the color options here. So let's go red, and we'll change the message to greeting. Go ahead and run that, and there we go. But if you have a lot of these in here, you may decide you want to have groups, and these usually just have drop downs like this. But maybe you want to take it a step further. You don't even want to see the drop down arrow unless you've actively, quote unquote, enabled that group. So let's take a look at how we would do that. All right, so going into our script here, you can see just in ready to remove that print, we clear out the text, and then we append onto it to center it, font size of 100 so you can see clearly. We have two placeholders, one for the color and one for our message. Right? Message is just a string, and our color comes from our enum colors, where we have white, yellow, red, blue, and green for the user to pick from. Now, normally you would come in here and you would do something like export underscore group. If I can spell at some point, you might put this in as like text data, right? Or something like that. And now you have this drop down. That's what we had before, but again, maybe you don't want to see this drop down. Right? But look at, maybe you don't want to see this little arrow, this drop down. You don't even want to see that unless you're actually have this enabled. So how can we do that? Well, in order to do that, we would have to come in and we have a new export. Well, not a new export, but we would use export custom, and then we would use a property hint here. In this case, it's going to be property hint group enable. And this takes a second argument. We don't need any hint string here, so we just leave it as an empty string. And this only works with booleans, of course. So we have to go var. We need a boolean, so I'll just do text underscore data just so it matches my group name. It doesn't have to, by the way. I'm just doing this for keeping that consistency. And this is a boolean that will be set to false by default. And you can see now that that arrow is now gone for our text data. And if we turn this on, you see now we have that drop down arrow for that foldable container here. All right, so you only see these options if you have that turned on. Now, here's why I say it's only good for grouping, for organization, if you want to remove some of that drop down if you're not using it. So for example, we have this set, right? And I have it turned off, but we already set some of that info, right? We changed the color, we spammed in some string, and even with it off, we go ahead and run it, and we can see all these values are still set. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day whether it's on or off. These values that you put in is still going to carry over. So you would still need to come in here and be like, if text data, use these values. If not, do this instead, right? Or use these default values or something. So it's still got to use it like a normal Boolean if you want to make those kind of checks. It's just more of a organizational thing in terms of the inspector. Now, what you can do, if you've looked at the dynamic inspector video that we've done before, what we can do here is we can actually do a set here. So that's going to be a colon, drop down set, open close parentheses, argument of value, colon, drop down to the new line. And what we can do is we can grab text data equals value, because that's how set works. So at the very least we have that. And then what we can do is come in here and call notify property list changed. And if you looked at the dynamic inspector, this should look familiar to you. We can come on down and there's a pre-made function for this. Func underscore, what is it called? Is it something about property, get property list? Not an underscore, is it? Validate property, there it is. Underscore validate underscore property is an argument of property, which is a dictionary. It returns nothing, but whenever we notify the property list has changed, we're sending that signal for an update. And when that update happens, it's going to run through validate property. So if you want anything to change within the inspector, this is where we would do that. So for example, I'm going to come in here and when it's toggled on, we can use that. But when I toggle it off, I want the color to be reset to use the white text. I want message reset to being an empty string. Right, so that's what I want. So I'm going to say if not text data, then I'm going to set message to an empty string, and I'm going to set color equals colors dot white. All right, now you might take a look at this, you try this, type it in, change the color, off, on. You'll notice that the values still stay there. Okay, maybe it's a Godot thing. Right, so let's close the scene. Go ahead and save it. Open it back up. We can take a look. Off, on, off, on. It's not changing. It's not updating. Well, that's because the last thing we need to do is we actually need to make this a tool script if you want to change those, have those values changed to a default, like in this case, whenever we disable it. So we can do that, save, and you might try it now. It still doesn't change. That's because we added it as a tool script. So we actually have to reopen that scene that has that script. So now if we turn it off, and then once we turn it back on and look at it, we can see the defaults are set, white message. So if we have it on, we can go red, greetings. If we run it, we can see our text. And if we disable it, say we're not going to use it, then I can run it and we see nothing is here, which means the message is an empty string, first of all. So if it's an empty string that's being set, we can safely assume the colors is being set as well. And if we want to be safe about that, or you're a little paranoid, you want to check that, you could always go ahead and print them out. Right, so print colors.keys and pass in color. And you'll see that that is white. There you go. Right down there in the output. So if you just want to use it for organization in the inspector and just use it like a normal Boolean, all you need is export a group and then create an export custom that is a Boolean that has the property hint group enable. Property hint. And that's all. If you wanted to update that data, you need to make it a tool script. You can go ahead and into the set part of a set get for that Boolean. Make sure you actually set your value, call for the notify property list, and then inside of validate property, make your changes for when that Boolean gets disabled. All right. So there you go. That's how you can do it simple, and there's how you can do it with reverting back to defaults. I know I'm about to ramble on. I probably started doing that already, but that's it. Take care. Have yourselves a good one. I'll see you guys next week.